Stand! Stand! Stand!
You want to dance? Ask me nicely. Let's talk. Better listen very carefully.
No problem. You having fun?
No!
Thanks.
Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Jean-Claude Van Damme, the podcast where we talk about Van Damme movies because he is cool as ice. Joining me today is my friend Aaron Armstrong from the We Love to Watch podcast. How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing great, Marcus. How are you doing?
I'm alright. I'm talking about Van Damme. It's kind of what I do.
Never happier than when you're Van Damming.
I'm surprised I'm not burnt out yet, but who knows? Who knows? By the end of it, I'll probably hate. No, I can't even say that. I won't hate him. So why don't we get started by telling me your experience with Van Damme, how you first came across him, your general feelings on him, and why you chose today's movie.
So I knew this was going to come up, and part of the reason I really wanted to come on this podcast, besides the fact that I really love this podcast and I really love your other podcast, Crush Celluloid.
Oh, shucks.
Is because I feel like this is an embarrassing thing to admit. I really haven't seen that many Van Damme movies. It's really bad. So the first one I saw was Street Fighter, which is probably the first one a lot of people see, because you're not really looking at necessarily Van Damme, but it's I like this video game, and this is a movie featuring those same characters from the video game, and I gravitated towards it. I think I was at that age where I didn't realize it was not good. I just was like, I'm not going to watch that movie again, but I didn't really dawn on me about how terrible it was. I was probably like 11 or 12. It was about right when it came out.
I watched it so many times. I actually am still not convinced that it's a terrible movie.
I should watch it again because just because the way that I was watching it at 11 for 12 was probably to see all my favorite Street Fighter characters do their thing on the silver screen.
It does not deliver that.
No, it does not at all. So if I watched it now as a 33-year-old, I may be watching it for completely different reasons.
I feel the same way about that as I do about the Super Mario Brothers movie, which you're going to do on your podcast pretty soon. But I saw that in theaters as a kid, and I watched that tons of times too, and it wasn't until I got older to where I was like, oh, this isn't very good, is it? But I can still go back and watch it and still kind of like it.
Yeah, spoiler for a month down the road of my podcast, but I actually really like that movie. I think it's a terrible Super Mario movie, but it's a really weird and interesting movie that people thought was a good idea to show kids.
Yeah, I kind of get, because I actually saw that in theaters with my father and one of my uncles, and I loved it, and they were just fucking baffled by it.
Yeah, both are very fair reactions. It's a really crazy movie, but it's crazy in, I don't know, just this bonkers 90s way that has a trouble to be replicated. That's not my memory of Street Fighter. It's kind of my memory of Mortal Kombat to some extent, a movie I also like. But yes.
I really like Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, and Street Fighter just did not, I don't know. I should watch it again. But actually, I probably shouldn't, because I'm going to run you down the list of Van Damme movies that I've seen, Marcus, and you're going to be extremely disappointed with me.
Is it going to be a short list?
It's going to be a very short list. Okay. So it was Street Fighter, and then I can actually do this in order. Time Cop, which I saw sometime when I was in high school, because I was anything science fiction I watched. I liked Time Cop. And then flash forward probably 15 years, and I saw Hard Target a couple years ago, and fucking loved it. Absolutely loved it. After Face Off, it would be my favorite John Woo movie. And then the only other one that I've seen that I don't even remember him in this movie, but according to IMDb, the only other one I've seen is Last Action Hero, which I guess he's in.
He has a brief cameo towards the end, when they're actually at the movie premiere. Okay. He's getting interviewed.
See, and when I saw it as a kid, I'd only seen him in Street Fighter, so maybe I didn't pay attention. Didn't register
it's possible. And actually, Cole from Crush Celluloid with me, I of course want him to do the podcast eventually, but he was like, yeah, let's do Last Action Hero for mine. And I was like, he has 30 seconds of screen time as a cameo. That's a Schwarzenegger. And he's like, yeah, let's do that and Kung Fu Panda 2. Those will be mine.
Yeah, I saw his credit there. On that same note, I after I was doing that lesson, I was like, have I even fucking seen a Steven Seagal movie? And I have seen Machete.
Oh, that's it?
That's it. So
You have not seen films along the similar line of the one we're talking about today and his Under Siege films?
Nope, not a one. Or even Executive Decision, which I love. Kurt Russell. I've never seen that. And that's kind of what I wanted to start talking about, is that if there is like I feel like I'm pretty versed in movies in general, but if there is like a genre that I have completely missed the boat on as a cinephiliac or whatever, it's like 80s and 90s, one step below Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis, like action movies. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch them as a kid, and then by the time I was like, and if I was like sneaking a movie, it was something like Terminator or Aliens, or probably something science fiction related or something, and then
or boob related.
Yep, especially 12 or 13. And anything that had a nice looking lady on the cover, your motivations are pretty simple at that age. So yeah, it was that stuff. And then by the time I got into high school, I was really trying to like watch classics, and both classics from the sense of like the classics that I hadn't been allowed to see, or like Aliens or Die Hard or Terminator, all that, Total Recall. I've seen a lot of Schwarzenegger ones, I think, just because they tend to lean more science fiction, which I was really into. And then, yeah, I just, between new movies and other stuff, I really never circled back and watched the Van Damme and the Seagal, and like even like the kind of, I don't want to say second rate as like a negative, but like the Cobras and the Over the Tops, and
yeah, kind of the second tier action movies.
Like, I just completely missed the boat on that, and I didn't even realize how much I loved them until recently. We talk a lot about canon movies on our podcast, and I fucking love them. I think they're really great, and it kind of but there's so much I still need to go back and kind of catch up on. So maybe you'll also have some recommendations for me after this, and where to start with some of this.
Yeah, so your list was like 3 or 4 films of Van Damme's, which is cool. Like, you get to discover all of these and have an adult opinion on them,
yeah.
Which I can't even imagine, because I've been obsessing over these films since I was a kid. But yeah, you haven't seen kind of what everyone considers the top tier, which would be Bloodsport.
Yep.
Which is also, when I talk about the tropes of Van Damme movies throughout this episode and all the shows, like, that's what I'm always referring to, is like, that's kind of what put him on the map. So these are the things that show up in his films that he tries to replicate. Which
I bet I saw a lot in Hard Target, because that was the only one that I've seen that, of the 4 or 5, including Sudden Death, that really felt like what I would picture as a Van Damme movie. Like, I know it's a John Woo movie, sometimes more than Van Damme, but it's got the slow motion, it's got the kicking. Like, you sent me a list of Van Damme tropes to, like, note in this podcast, and I don't think one of them applied to this movie.
Well, see, that's what's so weird about it, because you did just mention it, which I don't think we had yet. We are talking about 1995's Sudden Death today, which is basically Jean-Claude Van Damme's Die Hard.
Yeah.
Which he hasn't really done. That's something that kind of all the action heroes tend to get their own Die Hard in a way. Because, like, Stallone had Cliffhanger, Seagal had his Under Siege movies and stuff. Like, once Die Hard came out and blew up, like, that's kind of what everyone strived for, at least did. That's why there's so many of them in the 90s, and I actually do a column on Crest Celluloid about Die Hard ripoffs, and I wrote about this film like 2 years ago.
I'm glad I haven't read it yet, so that I can not know your opinion about this movie going into it, because I don't know your opinion. And I will say, but you are right, because there's nothing that they liked more in like the late 80s and 90s than like trapping action heroes into like condensed locations.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good story. It's because Die Hard is such a good fucking movie. It's such a classic. Like, they tried to replicate that as many times as possible, and it worked for a while.
Yeah.
Or at least sometimes it worked. Like, because Under Siege, like, that was a huge hit as well. Cliffhanger was huge. This was a decent hit. Like most of Van Damme's films, they tend to do much better overseas than they do here. But yeah, this is kind of a weird point, because this is 95, so Van Damme films, like, when you think about them, are usually more so like martial arts style films, like your Bloodsports and Kickboxers and even Hard Target and stuff. But this is when he's going a bit more mainstream. So like the year before, he did Street Fighter, which, although is kind of considered a flop, actually did like 100 million worldwide, so it was a hit. Same thing with Time Cop, that was another 100 million worldwide. So, he was doing kind of video game movies, sci-fi movies, and now he's doing a straight up like Die Hard movie, and that's why he doesn't really do a lot of martial arts in this movie.
Yeah, And it's also crazy because, like, so, I mean, this was a big budget movie. This was I remember it in 1995.
It was about 35 million?
Yeah, I mean, that's big for an action movie in 95. What's crazy is, so it was in 1999 I started working at the video rental store, or maybe it was 2000. And by then, like, this is only 5 years later, he went from, like, headlining, a pretty big budgeted Die Hard ripoff, which was, again, that was just a template for movies at that time. Mm-hmm. And then went to, everyone at the video store was making fun of, oh, we got Legionnaire in. So, like,
poor Legionnaire.
Well, I haven't seen it, obviously, but that's a pretty short time to go from, like, but I feel like that happened to all of them. One of the things that I do remember really well about, like, all those, the Seagals and even, like, the Kurt Russells, and in some ways the Mel Gibsons, like, everyone who's, like, either a main, like, 90s, late 80s action star, it feels like by the time the late 90s and the early 2000s roll around, every single one of them is doing either much smaller budgeted movies that get small releases. You have, like, Stallone doing, like, Driven and Get Carter. Schwarzenegger's doing End of Days and, like, this, some really bizarre choices.
End of Days, by the way, directed by Peter Hyams.
Yep.
Yeah, the guy that directed Sudden Death.
Yep.
But yeah. I think that stems mostly just because action changed.
It changed so
around the
quickly,
early 2000s, though. And that's mostly due to, like, the Bourne Identity.
The Matrix.
I think that just completely, and the Matrix, like, those kind of, like, fast-paced, close shaky cam fight scenes, more wire work and stuff like that. That stuff coming in kind of made the 80s and 90s action star kind of obsolete. Like, they kind of changed the way they made action movies. So they still got to make their movies, but yeah, they were mostly direct-to-DVD or smaller budget releases and stuff like that. Which, I mean, I guess just kind of happens when the times change, but they all kept working, and some of them fared better than others.
Yeah.
Steven Seagal is still putting out the same fucking movie every year with him on the cover with a shitty goatee and a gun.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like but I do remember, like, late 90s, early 2000s, like, it felt like those movies had run its course and they weren't making good versions of them anymore. Even the ones I was watching. But, like, looking back on that timeline, and you go from, like, the kind of second-level action star Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'm sorry to say that on this podcast, but, you had Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and then you had Willis and everyone else. And then, so you have that in 95, and then by, like, 98, he's doing straight-to-video stuff, and they all are, like, just looking back on that timeline, it happened so fucking quickly.
Oh, yeah, because, his first, like, real lead appearance was in Bloodsport, which was 88, I believe. And then his last theatrically released film until, like, the past couple of years was... I think until 2008 with JCVD was 1999's Universal Soldier: The Return.
Yeah, I mean,
which bombed horribly, and then it was just straight to DVD stuff. Though there is some good stuff. I can give you recommendations out of that almost decade period from, like, 99 to 2008 where he did do some good, because he couldn't make his same Van Damme films all the time, he did a couple that didn't work, but he did a lot of weird and strange things that you wouldn't really expect of him, like different kinds of movies that he's really good in.
Yeah, I've heard JVCD is awesome. I have so much on from my Netflix queue to watch list, like, I just haven't yet, like, done that thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to start watching 10 of these. Because that feels like the right way to do it. Like, it feels like, clear your calendar and then just find the time to watch Van Damme movie after Van Damme movie. And then that's, like, after you watch, like, 6 or 7 of them, then you watch JVCD or something like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way you should do it, but if you do that, be careful which ones you pick, because you want to pair up some different ones in there, otherwise you might just kind of watch the same movie 6 times in a row. But yeah, if you get a good glimpse of that, then watching JCVD, like, would... Because I guess you haven't seen that one, but it's really good, and if you kind of know his career and what happened to him, because another big part of why that happened is, he became a huge star in the early to mid-90s, then in the mid-90s kind of started to fizzle out, had drug problems, divorces, stuff like that, and then just kind of slid off a little bit, and then has an awesome redemption story to where he's back in full force now. His Amazon pilot just got picked up.
Yeah, I heard
that. I'm so
that.
happy about that.
Isn't that called, is that called JCVD as well, or...
It's Jean-Claude Van Johnson.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, he basically plays himself, but he is also, like, moonlights as, like, a secret agent.
Yeah, he does seem to have, and I know this from reading reviews of JCVD when it came out, Like, he does seem to have a really good sense of perspective and, like, a sense of humor about himself, which is very much not true of many of the 80s, 90s action stars.
Ooh, no, that's why Seagal is still making the same movie every year.
Yeah.
He will not play with his image at all and cannot take a joke at his own expense. Which is, again, because JCVD is already very charming and charismatic on film, like when you see him in his movies. So since he takes himself kind of lightly now and is able to play with his image and kind of make fun of himself and seems like he's just enjoying working, like that just makes him endearing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he always seemed like, Seagal was definitely, and again, I know this from no movies, but just interviews, like, he just seemed like he was not having fun and he took himself too seriously. And, that didn't fly as much as the 90s, I think, progressed. Like, no one was, I think after the Republicans were gone and the Democrats took office, like, you had to have a little bit of a sense of awareness. Self-awareness.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is that people just started to realize as movies changed, like, oh, these movies are silly. So if you embrace that, you could have fun and still make a fun movie like that. But if you still try to take it seriously and, do that, 5 guys are coming at you and they attack you one at a time kind of thing, like, it just doesn't fly the same way anymore.
Yeah, so I should tell you, though, why. So I actually chose Sudden Death for a very particular reason, though. It probably just sounds like I picked a random one or something because I hadn't seen that many. Or one that wasn't chosen, but I think this is the first one I suggested, and I did that for one very specific reason. When I was in high school, I knew that this was like a gap for me. I knew that like 90s, 80s, Jean-Claude Van Damme type movies were just a blind spot that I hadn't seen that many of. So I picked up a few VHSs to rectify it at some point. Stuff like Assassins, The Specialist, and Sudden Death. So I watched The Specialist, I watched Assassins, I watched another one that I got, and I never watched Sudden Death.
But you still have your copy?
I have it somewhere. I did not watch it for this. It just happened to be on HBO On Demand, and like I don't know.
That would have been beautiful.
I don't know where my VCR is. I do have it, and I don't know where half of my VHSs are. But it felt like, I had bought this almost 20 years ago, at least 15, 16 years ago, to like get into Van Damme movies. Like, what a perfect circle to now I'm going to try again, and I'm going to appear on the Van Damme podcast and finally watch this fucking movie that I didn't watch for 16, 17 years.
Well, that is an amazing reason to do that. I'm glad you shared that. So yeah, we've kind of said it's Sudden Death, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme's Die Hard, it's Die Hard in a hockey stadium. And your villain, which I think is one of the strongest suits of this film as well, because Jean-Claude Van Damme plays kind of a good everyman, even though he's weird and has his French accent and everything. Yeah. But he makes a good John McClane type. And, one of the things that these Die Hard ripoffs usually get wrong are just weak villains, because that's one of the best things about the original Die Hard is Hans Gruber. So in this movie, we have Powers Booth, who I think is fantastic as a Die Hard-esque villain. But there's something weird about Powers Booth, and I was never really able to put my finger on it until I was watching this again. And I realized that, for some reason, Powers Booth just really reminds me of Huey Lewis, if he just had, like, the swagger and suaveness of, like, Bruce Campbell. Like, that's what I think of when I look at Powers Booth.
Yeah. I can see that. He plays, he always plays a good villain, but he normally kind of plays, I think, kind of a stoic villain, kind of has his stuff together. Here he kind of gets to be that mid-90s, like, almost too clever by half, and some of his dialogue is definitely overbaked and a little bit too on the nose, but he still does a good job of selling it, even if the words are kind of eye-roll inducing, and he's definitely having, a ton of fun. I can totally see. He's got the jaw for it. I can see the Bruce Campbell type comparisons, especially.
Yeah. But for some reason, his face and his eyes and everything, he just looks like Huey Lewis to me. Or like Huey Lewis looks like his goofy twin brother or something.
Yeah.
But
I
he
can
just
see
has...
it. Yeah.
Yeah, he just has like the mannerisms of like a Bruce Campbell or someone kind of like suave and smooth. But yeah, and he's great. And yeah, some of the dialogue is kind of horrible, but given the way his character is, I could kind of almost see like he wrote down these lines beforehand. He's like checking a piece of paper in his pocket every once in a while. He's like, oh yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Before he like says something. Like that just kind of seems like maybe what his character is a little bit.
I think whoever wrote the movie also kind of, I'm not trying to get ahead of the plot too much, but I think whoever wrote the movie, like, was trying to write a Shane Black type movie, because a lot of the dialogue where he's just kind of, where he's both, like, going through the motions of an action movie, but trying to comment on it, like, because Powers Booth has a great line where he says, like, you know, just an angry expat who wants money for a political cause, when he's explaining his, like, reasons for doing it. And I think it's stuff like that he delivers very well, but is a little undercooked. It didn't quite get to Shane Black, maybe Shane Gray level. Didn't get all the way there.
Well, here's an interesting thing about that, because the writer of this film, his name's Gene Quintano. He is the writer-director of National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1. He also wrote Police Academies 3, 4, and 5, as well as Operation Dumbo Drop.
That's perfect.
Originally, this script was like a parody of action movies, a parody of Die Hard-esque movies. And then it just got kind of transformed into a straightforward Die Hard-esque movie. And apparently the only thing from the original, like, parody script that survived was the fight with the penguin mascot, which they just put into the film for real.
Yeah, that was an awesome scene. I loved it, but it definitely felt out of place in a Die Hard.
Like, this could have been a Zucker Brothers movie, like, yeah. with the kind of stuff going on in it.
And also, right after that, that's where that other henchman finds him, because this was the other, like, line of too clever type dialogue I wrote down, because it was so noticeable, where he's like, yeah, man, we got your daughter over here, and then he's like, we got Helen. I forget the daughter's name already. Instead of doing that action movie thing where they pause and the hero realizes that I never told you my daughter's name, the villain goes, oh shit, I guess you didn't tell me his name. Like, which is
he's like, oh, I always do this.
Yeah, like he's playing with the trope in like a outright comedic way, which is really, again, that's a very Shane Black thing to do. But the fact, I feel like that was probably toned down from maybe parody as well, if that's where the script started.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing is that, yeah, Shane Black will play with tropes and kind of flip them on their head and be clever about it, but this is from the writer and director of Loaded Weapon 1, which is more straightforward, like, Naked Gun style parody, so, like, that's where it kind of hits, but it was just transformed into a regular Die Hard movie, which works that way, because that's what these films are, but it just is extra silly because of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this definitely has a sense of, that's one of my notes, that this is sillier and goes to some weirder places than I was expecting for we're all locked in the hockey stadium. Absolutely. Okay, so before we go into the basic plot of it, I'm going to throw out a couple of the Van Damme tropes that show up or don't show up in the film, because a lot of them don't. This is very different from your standard Van Damme movie, because it's Van Damme playing at Die Hard. So, first of all, Van Damme plays Darren McCord. Yeah, his name is Darren McCord. His nationality is usually something that either does or doesn't come up in his films in a ridiculous kind of way. And it's not really brought up too much, but he speaks French, and he has a throwaway line where he says he's from Canada. Yep, and he played hockey there. Yeah, he played hockey there, but his name is Darren McCord, which is just not a very Van Damme-sounding name. Super Canadian, though. Oh, yeah. So as far as shirtlessness or nudity, nope, got none of that in this. The splits, which is something that usually shows up, and even if not splits, like, you know, flying spin kicks and stuff like that. But no, none of that. And there was a perfect opportunity for one as well, because late in the movie, when he's dressed up as the goalie and out on the ice, he should have done a split to block the puck and save the game. He doesn't dance or get drunk in the film, but since he's a disgraced firefighter who's had, like, mental problems and divorce problems after, like, letting a little girl die, he probably had some booze problems. And finally, just the personal vendetta is that the vendetta he has against the bad guy is that he kidnapped his daughter. And he only, like, for a guy that's known primarily for kick-related reasons, he only does, like, 2 kicks in the movie. He does do several, kind of, like, putting his whole weight into a kick, like jump-up kick things or swinging on thing kicks. And I like those, because he doesn't do those a whole lot in other films. Yeah, he does them against the mascot, and then right after the goalie comes in, he takes out that big, bad henchman with some full body kicks. I was keeping track, Marcus. You sent me that list, and I'm like, look, I haven't seen shirtlessness. I'm at least writing down kicks. There is not a single Van Damme bun in this film, and it's a shame.
No.
I don't know why, but it could have been in there somewhere. But yeah, no, there's really not any of that. And it's cool. I get it. It's something different. Like, he was trying to branch out and do different things. So it totally works in that regard. But some of these things, like, come on, if people are going to go see a Van Damme movie, you could toss in a couple of them. And there's also, like, no really slow-mo, like, screaming or, like, action shots or anything. The only slow-motion shot I picked up on when I watched it this time was that there's a slow-mo shot during the hockey game when he's, like, blocking the puck.
Isn't it slow-mo where he throws, like, the hand, where he throws the glass bottle of explosive gel into the roof?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, that is done in slow-mo, which is a batshit insane scene that I love, but it looks terrible.
Yeah, it does look terrible. That's easy to forgive. There is something about, like, it's going to be a lot of composition shots and...
But it sticks out like a sore thumb a few times. And also, I mean, I know, obviously, he's not going to swing from the top of a dome and stuff like that, but maybe it's just because of all the big hits he had, and it's 95 Van Damme, but he's using that stunt double way too much in this movie, and it's obvious way too often.
Yeah, and also, like, I didn't understand his plan for sliding down, because I get it if you're going to slide down, throw your explosives, and go in the hole in the roof. All that makes just complete logical sense. We do it every day. Everyone gets it. But he had to make, like, 3 switches, and, like, it's just not... That's not a good plan. If you have to change ropes 3 to 4 times to get to your destination, and sliding mechanics and other random grates, like, that's...
Not even ropes, hanging lights that were not holding his weight.
Yeah, I didn't understand why they kept making him switch. But, again... Now that you mentioned this was originally a parody, maybe that was supposed to go on, like, for 20 times, and they cut it back to 4, and then now it's an action movie. Like, parody is you do it 20 times.
It keeps cutting back to the clock, and the clock is just, like, keeps going back seconds and stuff. I could see that. But no, this is straightforward action Die Hard film. Body count of 36.
Okay, there's something I want to say for once we get into the movie, because the body count used as a threat in this movie is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Except that, see, now I'm second guessing, like, well, isn't that a funny decision? Like, ha ha ha, who thought that was a good idea? But now that you're saying the script was originally a parody, I'm wondering if I am just falling into this trap where I'm not laughing at the movie's laughing at me.
Yeah, like, it just basically would take, all the parody scenes, all the things that would just be ridiculous in a movie like this, but it played it straight. And since we're, I guess, so used to these kinds of action movies, we're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, of course that happens. Oh, that's cool.
Because, again, so they start at the movie and they kill all the, like, 20 people in the to kind of get up into the vice president's chamber and cordon off everything. And then their big threat is, we're going to kill 1 person in the first quarter and then 2 people in the second quarter. Which was so ridiculous to me, because it's like, you just killed 30 people. Like, you can't go... And then the final one is they're going to blow up the whole arena. And I'm like, that is not a good progression for your plan. Like, one is too small. You just killed a bunch of people. You killed 2 of the vice president's guards. Now you're like, I'm going to kill 1 more. Like, you're going too low. And then for the second quarter, 2 is too low. Because, again, you've already killed 2 people in front of the vice president. You can't go down if you're going to threaten to kill people. And then blow up the entire stadium with everyone inside. Now it's too big. Like,
and then you jump to, like, 10,000, or however many that stadium holds.
Yeah, you gotta figure out something more in the middle. Either don't kill all the people for funsies before your big threats, or, like, maybe, kill 10, kill 15, kill 20. Like, you can't do that progression. That's a bad progression.
Well, but I suppose that goes to just, like, they killed all the people to get there, showing they mean business, and then they're in a room in the vice president's VIP box where there's, like, 8 people in the room that they have hostage. So, like, technically they have the whole stadium hostage because they have bombs wired and stuff, and they're in control. But yeah, they only have, like, 8 people in there, one of which is the vice president. So I guess, like, they could have done a little bit more, but you can't be like, I'm going to kill 20 people, because then you have to start yanking people out of the seats in the stadium.
Yeah, you got to let the game progress all the way through the movie.
Again, one of the funniest things, because it is called Sudden Death, because, a lot of death happens, but also because the actual hockey game that's going on, which is like Game 7, whatever the last game is of the Stanley Cup. Yeah, so that happens, and then the game itself goes into sudden death. And even though that happens, like, once the third quarter ends, he was supposed to, like, blow the stadium and leave. But then sudden death happens, so that gives Van Damme, like, 2 more minutes. And just like, why would that change your plan?
No, I know.
You don't have to wait for sudden death.
No, and he makes a big show of it, too. I'm like, he never... Like, this isn't like some sort of league-required rules that you're following. Like, you understand that, right? Like, you just made a threat. You picked an arbitrary time period to try to let people know they mean business. But he's about to blow everyone up, and then it's like, shit, sudden death. Well, I guess everyone gets a couple more minutes. Like, no, you don't need to follow those rules as laid out by the National Hockey League.
Well, I mean, he is a gentleman at the end of the day.
I guess.
So we open and we see Jean-Claude Van Damme as a firefighter trying to save a little girl in a burning building. And he's trapped under something, cradling her in his arms, trying to call his buddies to come get him. And then things fall and the little girl dies. And then we just immediately cut to 2 years later.
Yeah, it's not... They don't do much with that. And... It's over really quickly. Like, there's no, like, big dramatic scene build-up. It's like 2 minutes of just some guy walking in to a burning building that I guess, like, you see it's Van Damme, and then a kid dies, and then, 2 years later. And then it kind of comes up a couple times in the movie.
Which also, the title cards in this are ridiculous, because
Hilarious.
Again, everything almost seems like the point of parody, because it just cuts 2 years later, and then a couple seconds later, it goes game night. 4 hours until face-off, and then they keep going, like, after every scene, it's like 2 hours until face-off, 90 minutes until face-off, 2 minutes until face-off. Like, we don't need those.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this movie started out as a parody makes so much sense, because there's also the husband at the beginning, the stepdad, who says 3 lines, and every single one of them is necessary exposition. Like, not disguised exposition. He goes to pick up the kids to take them to this game. He's like, hey, yeah, I bought these tickets. I know I wasn't supposed to pick up the 2 kids to his ex-wife today, but I got these hockey tickets.
Who hates his guts, it seems.
Hates his guts. Doesn't even come out of the doorway. But then the stepdad says 3 things. He's working security at the game. Like, how does he know that? And then he goes, it's going to be a big...
He's a fire marshal, and he's like, hey, your dad's a fire marshal there. Very important job.
Yeah, and then he's like, and you know what? It's going to be a big night because the vice president's there. And then he says something about that his ex-wife asks him something about the job, and he goes, oh, yeah, it's part-time right now. He's still getting back into the groove of things. And it's like, and those are his 3 lines. He, like, tells him what his job is, who's going to be at the stadium, and, like... also nods a little bit to the fact that he spent 2 years, I don't know, hanging around his house after he lost a girl in a fire. Those are his
Drinking
only 3 lines. Is like very important, undisguised exposition.
Yeah, which could have been played... It would have been so easy to play that better, because he could have said those same exact lines, but if he did it with a bit of smarm, like he hates him, and he's now the man of the house or whatever, and he still has to deal with the fucking ex-husband, if he just played it a little bit smarmier and a little bit more condescending towards Van Damme, would have worked perfectly.
Or give him, like, another line or 2. So he says, like, hi, or don't stay out that late. Every time they cut to him, he's giving pertinent plot points out.
Well, I mean, they threw in that 2-minute opening scene, and then we're just kind of tossed into the action, so they got to get it in somewhere, and they had to pay that guy for the day, so give him something to do.
Again, it makes so much sense if that had been a parody scene originally.
Well, I think we're just going to say that after every scene in this movie.
I'll stop saying it, but it really has
codified the movie. I was about to say it again. I was about to say it again, because then we cut to Powers Booth and his gang of guys getting together, like all their stuff together, and in the opening shot that we see him in, he's completely silent, says nothing. He sets a bomb in a little penguin doll, and then walks away, and then everyone moves quickly and moves all the bags and everything out of the way, and then they're driving off, and the music builds as if like their whole warehouse is gonna blow up or something, but then it's just like the tiniest little like pop. Yep. Like just the little penguin explodes, and that's it. And again, parody.
I do like how many guys they have. This isn't one of those ragtag, we have 8 terrorists. They have like a football team worth of people Like both bench
there's like
bench
30
guys.
dudes.
Yeah, I know. And we find out later there's like more dudes that are in the other buildings covering the stadium. Like, look, I respect the operation. If you're going to try to steal $1.3 billion and take a whole stadium hostage, you can't just have 5 or 6 goons. Like, I appreciate that they have 50 goons.
Yeah, and not only that, but they do have one goon on the outside, or I guess technically 2 that we'll find about later. But they have one on the outside, and it's kind of like the wacky, goofy goon.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy that goes and kidnaps an old lady in broad daylight and takes her into her house, and then later on is like firing a rocket launcher at everything. Yeah, he takes his kids to the game, and they kind of go through all the security, and as he's walking them around the stadium, we kind of see Powers Booth's guys, getting into their positions and doing everything they're going to do. Van Damme takes his son to meet some of the players in the what do you call it, a locker room. I don't know sports. I'm sorry.
I mean, locker rooms, right?
Yeah. So
don't
they
be
go
down
there.
on yourself.
I don't sports. That's why I was like,
I know,
game
but have you been to like a
7?
YMCA? They have locker rooms. That's not sports specific.
I've never been to a YMCA. I've listened to the song a lot.
It's the same
That
thing.
helps.
Exact same
Okay,
thing.
okay. Then I've practically been there. So yeah, I guess we can kind of just jump into when the terrorism starts happening, because like I said, basically the son goes to the locker room, one of the hockey players says something in French to Van Damme, and it's played as a joke because the guy says in French, "We're gonna fuck them up," and then he's like has to translate for his kid, and
Ooh, hey,
also yeah, the daughter meets the mascot lady, which will come into play later. They also kind of see what their dad is doing there at the stadium. Even though he's a fire marshal, he's making sure everything's up to code, making sure everyone is safe in a huge place holding so many people. They just happen to see him change a light bulb in the kitchen, and they're just like, oh, daddy's a light bulb changer.
Yeah, is he though? Because he spends way too much time just hanging out with his kids. He's both a terrible parent, which we'll get into, and he's also not great at his job.
It kind of seems that way, but then again, I don't really know much about what a fire marshal will do in a situation like that, because it seems like he was just put on for this particular game. I don't know if he was working all the other games and he had been doing this all week and he knows exactly like everything's up to code and he's just walking around checking on shit now. Powers Booth and his men get up to where the vice president is. They have to cut through the kitchen, and there's a cook named Andrew who, like, no one can get through unless Andrew recognizes them. So the old lady we see get kidnapped earlier is Andrew's wife, and they threaten to kill his wife unless they let them through, like Powers Booth and his dudes. And then they just kill everyone anyway, because they got to get up to 36 on that body count.
Yeah. And they say after they kill the cook, and everyone, the vice president's team is, like, shocked. And Powers Booth has the great... it's okay, he was still recovering from losing his wife.
Yeah.
Because they shot his wife, too. This is back when I feel like movies, villains, and their terrorist bands were, like, more callously cruel, which I actually kind of appreciate. Like, they were definitely always bad guys. They're not conflicted. They're not doing it for any particular noble cause. I don't feel like there's as many movies like that anymore.
Well, no, because you usually either try to make people somewhat relate to the villain or see where they're coming from, or they're just straight up evil and bad, and there's no redeeming qualities. But yeah, in the 80s and 90s especially, yeah, they were more playful. They, like, got some good lines and some good jokes to where, even though they're terrible people, like, you kind of like watching the villain as well. And he gets a lot of that in here. But yeah, you don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah, I think it's because now when you have terrorism can't be funny anymore. So if you have an action movie where there's terrorists taking over something, they're either if they're white Americans, they're doing it for some like very serious cause, and they have some sort of goal like rebelling against the way the country's gone or something like that. Or you have probably like offensive Islamic stereotypes, and they're taking
who do it because they're brown.
Exactly. So, and for all their Muslim reasons and gross stuff like that. So because they're the terrorists nowadays are more on missions, you don't get the same sort of callous cruelty because they're usually trying to paint them as like misguided fundamentalists of some sort. So
instead of just like basically what amounts to like a heist movie just done through terrorism. terrorism.
Exactly. Yeah, you just don't have like just I'm a bad guy, I want money, and I'm an asshole. Like you don't have that as much anymore.
Which is good, because, like, he shoots one guy, like, I guess one of the Secret Service men, and the vice president is like, that man had a wife and a 5-year-old child, and blah, 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 blah. And Powers Booth is just like, I'll send a card.
Yeah.
Like, great lines like that. Like, yeah, you don't really see kind of playful, mischievous kind of villains like that in action movies as much anymore.
Yeah.
Also, I really hate children. I know you are a father. I'm not trying to blanket that statement completely, but more specifically just in movies, I really hate children. Like, the daughter in this movie is horrible, and I found out, it was on IMDb, so I don't know if it's true or not, but originally, Mara Wilson from, like, Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda and stuff like that was going to play that role, but then her parents wouldn't let her do it because of the content, the violence, and everything like that. But that would have been so much better, because this little girl is not good.
I think it's 100% correct, because they clearly dress her up like Mara Wilson. Like they're trying to kind of make that connection. Yeah, the daughter's bad. I don't dislike children in movies, but I do dislike movies where the children are nothing more than like empathy machines, so that you have a reason to root for the hero. Like it's distracting in a very negative way. Like if someone has a knife to a 6-year-old, that's hard to just like laugh off. Or this movie's really big crime. Like, when Jean-Claude Van Damme is throwing grenades and blowing up stuff in the room where his daughter's in, that's harder to take. Or when he is going for cold-blooded revenge against the killer while he lets his daughter hang by her little hands above the hockey arena.
And lets a helicopter fall right where
past
she
her.
is.
Yeah.
Easily could have killed her.
Does not seem concerned. Like, Die Hard worked because his wife is the person who's under threat in that movie, and she's
who
also
can take care of herself.
Yeah, strong,
She's
capable character. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Like, to put 2 defenseless children and then put one of them, like the younger one, like an 8-year-old, in that much like threat of danger, that takes away fun from your fun action movie.
Except in certain instances, because there are some times where that still kind of works because of a villain like Powers Booth. Like when he asked the little girl, he's like, would you like it if I filled your mouth with spiders? Like that is kind of an awesome thing to say to threaten a child.
There's a way to do it, I think, and be successful, but to constantly put him in that much physical danger, and also like if Jean-Claude Van Damme had been like, he's not a parental figure, and if he is supposed to be, he's not doing a good job of it in this movie, in the way that he definitely wants to save his kids, but is way too callous about how dangerous he's putting them in these situations.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, he totally comes off like a weekend dad.
Oh, yeah.
And to also be fair, his kids kinda suck.
Yep.
And to also be fair, when he does like get into like threatening the bat, because there's a really good scene where like Powers Booth and Van Damme first talk over the phone, and it's all like red and stuff, and they're having a back and forth about what they're gonna do to each other. Like that is great, but at the same time, when he's talking about like, if you hurt my daughter, blah blah blah, it kind of seems like this is what I'm supposed to say in this situation, right? Like I don't care that much. I'm totally gonna throw a homemade bomb at the booth that she's in just so I can get in and kill some bad guys.
Yeah, and I thought it worked. Yeah, it's when they went too far with it, because I did think that it worked when they put her on the phone and he's like, don't say anything to him about this being me. But then he reveals it anyways, like 10 seconds later. Like, they were starting with some interesting tension where he's kind of using his daughter as both to let her know it's okay, but then he's also like, this is the best chance I have to rescue my daughter, is to use her for my own ends. And then that goes away to like stereotypical, give me my kid back if you touch a hair on her head. And like it, like there's a spark of cleverness and a way to use his kid as a immediate danger that I thought they were gonna capitalize on, and then it like goes away.
Well, it just becomes the same old trope of, like, that's just the reason why he can't, immediately kill the bad guy and has to chase him and go through everything in the third act.
Yep.
But also, like, I kind of saw it a little bit differently in that scene. I saw it as like he was trying to hide who he was, but Powers Booth already knew who he was because he had the little girl that said her father is here doing this and he's a fireman. They'd already looked up who he was, and then he called in and he's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I think he already knew who he was, so that's why he put him on the phone with the daughter. And then, like, you know, a second later when he's like, oh, if you touch my daughter, he's like, well, yeah, of course it's you. Don't tell him who I am. Fuck you. I know who you are.
Oh, see, it's because he calls from the cell phone of the dead Secret Service agent who was working for him.
Yeah, there's a double cross that's fucking useless in this movie.
I kind of like it. I like it because it surprised me. Like, that doesn't happen. I was expecting...
Really?
I did not expect it. Now, I haven't seen it as many times as you probably have. But
not only that, I just mean like these types of. Well, I guess like you said, you haven't seen like Under Siege or anything like that. Like there's always the inside guy that does the double cross to the hero and stuff like that. It's kind of like the same way Hans Gruber had the scene with McClane and Die Hard, like when they first met, or like in Under Siege, Gary Busey's character is that kind of thing. Like it's a trope of these kinds of films. So I kind of expected it.
See, I expected him to be the Reginald Vell Johnson character, though. Like, I expected they were doing that because he's talking to him, he's communicating
so
with the
like,
police.
just because he's black? Come on, guy.
No, the Die Hard. the specific... This is a Die Hard ripoff. I thought he was the Die Hard character. But
also, shout out to Reginald Vell Johnson. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's great. So that's what I thought they were doing, like, because he's communicating to them. He's like the head of the Secret Service. I was kind of not expecting him to turn. I wasn't looking for a double cross. And then I was like, did I miss how he got into this building or why he's here?
Oh, it's so stupid how they do it, though, because he just starts walking towards her. He's like, hey, they said no one in there. And he's just like, well, if they're going to shoot one single man, then whatever. I think I can get in. And then he just shows up, like, down below where Van Damme is. Like, that's kind of sketchy to begin with.
Yeah, in the movie's defense, though, I thought that was dumb. But it turns out that the movie did have a reason for how he got in there so easily.
I will say, I do love how he is dispatched of, though, because, of course, he comes back to Van Damme, and I guess Van Damme was already kind of, like, you know, not trusting him or something, or at least just had another weapon in his back pocket.
Yeah.
And he takes the squirt gun that his son had, which he apparently had filled up with gasoline, and just, like, shoots it with a lighter at Hallmark, the Secret Service agent, and he just completely sets on fire. Like, like he was already doused in gasoline prior to that.
Let's also talk about how, for no reason, for 10 minutes of this movie, all of a sudden fucking Jean-Claude Van Damme becomes Inspector Gadget or MacGyver or something and starts putting together little gadgets.
The shit out of this movie.
Yeah, and then it stops. But there's like, he does like a little air gun with like a knife, and he has the squirt gun flamethrower thing, and then that just stops being a thing.
Well, which is weird, okay, because he was a firefighter, and now he's a fire marshal. And one of the things I kind of like about this movie, and why I like that it's different than usual Van Damme movies, is that usually, you know, he's just a fighter. He knows martial arts. He can beat everyone up. Here, he gets the shit beat out of him through the entire movie. He's just a normal guy, and he can't fight very well. He tries his best. He's buff, but, you know, he just kind of, like, gets the shit beat out of him and has to use everything in his vicinity to try to win. But then they not only make him a MacGyver, where he just knows how to make anything and everything he might need, from a nail gun to homemade bombs, like, out of nothing. But yeah, he's also just a demolitions expert because he knows how to make bombs and he knows how to defuse bombs and stuff. And, like, he wasn't on the bomb squad. That would have made sense. He was a firefighter.
Look, if you're a firefighter, the first thing they do is teach you how to diffuse C4 explosives.
Hey, you defuse the bomb, there's no fire to fight. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. We're stopping the fire. It's before it happens. It's like precogs, except for fires. I did like, though, so one of my favorite, so when he punches out, before he realizes that
Hallmark,
before he realizes that I've been listening too much Hamilton, before he realizes that Hallmark is a traitor, he punches him in the face after he saves his life. And I did like that line. I like that's for doing your job half-ass.
Yeah. But yeah, no, they have a good little back and forth, but it's not really explored very much because it's just kind of like he shows up.
It's immediate.
Then you find out you find out he's working with a bad guy, and then the next time we see him is when Van Damme kills him. But of course, he does have a burned face jump scare right after that was kind of cool. But yeah, in addition to that, they also just have like when he meets back up with them, he's like, "Oh, how many bombs did you get?" And he's like, "I got 4." That's all? And he's like, "I'm just one guy. Like, how many did you get, man?" Like they just kind of crack jokes at each other, which is good. But then it immediately goes to the double cross and everything like that.
Yeah, because the reason that he doesn't kill him right away is because. So I feel like I missed something. Why does he think that he has a whole army working with him? Did he tell him that on the walkie-talkie?
No, I think what it was is initially he just wanted to gain his trust, so he didn't attack him immediately. And then I guess he was maybe gonna try to kill him, but then Booth's other men start shooting at both of them, and they have to run their separate ways. But I guess maybe he just wanted to make sure that no one else was working with Van Damme.
Okay.
Like there was no one else to worry about, and he was just a lone person working against them.
Yeah, I knew he was trying to figure out who else was working with him, but I wasn't sure why he was trying to figure that out.
Plot convenience? I don't know.
That's fair. I mean, that happens a lot in these movies. He does have a creepy scene where he tries to get his kid. Like, his son is kind of hilarious in this movie. They try to wrap the story of his firefighting tragedy up in his son's story.
Yeah.
Where he's like, don't you ever leave. There's buildings that are going to fall around. So his son has to stay in that seat, and he stays in that seat for the whole fucking movie. And then it's when Hallmark comes over and is like, your dad wants you, get up. And he's like, I'm not leaving this seat. My dad told me to stay in this seat. And they kind of do a little payoff on, like, I stayed even when the building was falling around me. Like,
but at that point, Van Damme should have been like, what are you, fucking stupid, kid? Like, everyone else left, things are blowing up. Fucking run, get away.
Yeah, I know.
I'll find you later.
They turn, like, I stayed in this seat to, like, I never let go. Like, it's super weird. And only comes up, like, 2 or 3 times, but that's, you know, his sister's gone for the entire fucking game, and he just sits in that seat.
Yeah, because there is, like, very surface level, like, him dealing with his dad no longer being a firefighter, kind of losing respect for him, but still wanting to respect him. There's that moment when he's the goalie where he does sign language, I love you to him, and he's like, what? My dad is cool?
My dad is Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It's the same
oh my god.
Yeah, it's the same moment.
I could see a mix between, like, the Santa Claus and Santa Claus with muscles being a Van Damme movie.
With Hulk Hogan, yeah. I think, actually, that the math checks out, that if you add Tim Allen and Hulk Hogan, you get Jean-Claude Van Damme.
You get Van Damme, yes, absolutely.
Especially the mid-90s hair comes directly from Tim Allen.
Back to sudden death. We skipped ahead and plot some, but I do just want to go back to the mascot fight, which I think is kind of amazing and one of the best action pieces in this movie. So his friend, this lady, is the mascot that we meet in the beginning of the movie. And then before he really knows what's going on, this is what clues him into it, is that it's a different woman in the mascot uniform, and they end up fighting in a kitchen. And it's everything from, like, hands into fryers to, like, eventually she gets choked to death and run through an industrial dishwasher. And it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, it's like a scene from like over-the-top horror movie.
Yeah, totally. But, like, again, it's just not really martial arts. He can throw a punch or a kick, but it's not really that stylized. He's using everything around him. That's why, like, he dips a hand in the fryer. That's why he gets the upper hand by, like, throwing red pepper flakes into her eyes. Like, that's what he has to do to get through a fight, and this is, you know, a fight with, like a female terrorist henchman who's not even, like, the big bad guy. He's still got to go through everyone else, but, like, his first real fight in the movie, and he gets the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah, it's a great subversion of the action movie. Like, you're right, they don't do the thing that a lot of these movies do. He's a suburban dad, but he's still Arnold Schwarzenegger and can, you know, punch and kick bad guys. They do a very good job of trying to make him a normal Joe who has to be resourceful.
But he's buff, but he's a firefighter, so it kind of makes sense that he's in good shape.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, he can throw a punch or a kick or whatever, but he's not, like, doing his martial arts moves. He's not, I guess, you know, not doing the splits, not doing spinning heel kicks and stuff like that. It makes sense, and I appreciate them doing that instead of just making it like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah, and he has to kill women by putting them through the dishwasher, like all normal dads do.
And as much as this does seem like a parody at times, he doesn't really do any like cheesy one-liners, which would have been so easy.
You're all wet?
Yeah, or like, no, you do the dishes.
Yeah.
Just like horribly misogynist like bullshit lines. And even like there's a death in this in the kitchen a little bit later on where a dude gets a bone through the neck. Like just a chicken bone through the neck.
It has some,
like,
it has
but
some
again, he
weird
could have
deaths.
just been like, you got boned. Ha ha! I forget where it is, but it's happening somewhere along the line. I think somebody stops him or something like that, and he's just like, I'm having a real bad day.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's the closest to like an action movie one-liner.
That's like when they first started doing one-liners.
Yeah.
That's like Commando level.
Oh, I love Commando.
I do too. But it's like it's one-liners hadn't evolved to like an area that we thought was clever. It was just saying whatever was in front of them.
So again, he diehards all the way around here. It's not really worth going into every death and everything, because instead of, 8 guys that he has to pick off one by one, there's 50 guys and he's killing 2-3 at a time, just however he can. So let's get to the big action set piece, or the set piece before the big action set piece, which is him swinging around in the dome. There's a fight atop the dome, and then eventually the explosion, and leads into the third act. Because this is all, like, really cool, and it's even, like, kind of... It's very diehardish in like the, tying something to yourself and jumping and swinging and stuff like that. But it's also just seems to be done on just a bigger scale and looks, I don't know, I think it's really cool the way they use the actual hockey stadium, like the dome in this movie.
Yeah, yeah, when he's crawling on top of it, when they're shooting down the helicopters with bazookas, like, it does have a really good sense of we're in a giant arena. It has a good sense of scale. Part of the reason for doing all these, like Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a plane, is you had this kind of, or even like Die Hard in a different building.
Yeah.
You had these
it's all
kind
these
of like,
small enclosed spaces.
Yeah, and they really kind of blew it up and made it feel big, and they use it very well in that kind of nebulous dome thing that like you see from a distance if you're at a hockey arena or watching it on TV. But you never actually like think of all the different components that are in place that someone could swing down, for example.
Well, yeah, because they still have the claustrophobic moments too, or like the small scale moments when like he's underneath the stadium, like going through the boiler room and everything like that. And no vent climbing or anything like that. But yeah, it does that, and it has very Die Hard moments. But then of course, yeah, he also has a fight on the very top of the dome, and he's swinging around, and you see all this space, which I did read about this, so I noticed it a lot when I watched it this time. But whenever it does like a large shot of the crowd where you see like multiple rows of stands, like you can see all the empty seats and all like the cardboard cutouts they put in for people in certain scenes.
Yeah, who comes to Game 7 of the finals?
Well, I think they only had like maybe 2,000 extras or something, and they had to make it look like 20,000. So they did a lot of like closer shots for like what they filled up at the bottom. But whenever it kind of pans up very quickly, you can see it's just like empty seats up top, or like cardboard cutouts of people that they put in to make it seem more.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's a big stadium for who knows how many. I mean, it feels like the finale took at least a couple weeks to film.
And I think during the time I read something about like the NHL was like on strike or something like that. Like something was going on to where like they weren't using the stadium, like they weren't playing at that time.
Yeah, so I gotta ask a question. I did not find this in my research. Did they blow up a helicopter in the Penguin Stadium?
Kind of. I'm not sure to what extent, but what I read is that they actually just had a giant crane that was like on like leaning over the dome and the opening, and they would lower the helicopter down. So I think that's what they did. Like they cleared everybody out. They had safety precautions in place. But yeah, they did actually have it on a crane, and then I guess like lower it down / drop it down and actually explode it onto that.
Yeah, because that
I'm not sure
explosion
how big
did not look like a model. It did not look like it was like superimposed, and they gave enough shots to make it seem like it was really in the stadium. So I'm like, did they fucking
I think
blow
they
up a
actually
helicopter?
did that. Yeah.
In Penguin
I'm not
Stadium?
sure if they maybe added a little bit to the explosion or anything like that, but they definitely did like actually drop and crash a helicopter in there.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's why it looks so good too.
And again, like with that kind of scale and doing that kind of stuff, the fact that it's 35 million, like that's pretty good for 35 million. Even 1995, I know that would be more like a 40-50 million dollar movie at this point.
Oh, I think like 60, 70.
Good times.
Like back, I bought this on VHS for $5. Now you can't even find VHS in the store.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That's
not
not
in
the
the
same
store.
thing.
Like I can find you a $5 VHS. Just give me a minute.
Yeah. Oh, so, yeah. That wasn't a good metaphor at all. Was what I thought.
I was like, some of those are worth quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not worth that much, but people will pay it when they're creep VHS collectors like I am.
Well, there's a lot that you can't get anywhere else, but this one you can watch on HBO On Demand until November 1st.
Oh, okay. I just have it on DVD.
I'm not surprised. You
Yeah,
should.
no,
If you didn't have it on DVD, Marcus, quit the podcast, go somewhere else, because this seems like a pretty important part of Van Damme's history.
I have a ridiculous amount of his movies on VHS and DVD. Mostly DVD. I have a few VHSs of his, but yeah, even like a lot of his 2000s work I have on DVD.
Do you have Legionnaire on DVD?
No, that's actually a VHS that I have.
He's on the motorcycle? No, it's Desert.
No, that's Desert Heat. I do
Yeah.
not own that one.
Okay. Again, this tells you, this is my video store days of look, he's in Desert Heat and Legionnaire. What happened to him?
One thing I do want to toss out that is also very 1995, but there's, of course, like, one of the terrorist guys is, like, the computer hacker guy, just same way in Die Hard and everywhere else. And he's kind of smarmy and, like, cracks jokes, but not too many technology jokes, which I was surprised by. But there is a shot towards the end where, like, all this heavy stuff is going on, and he's just sitting there playing Doom on his computer.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was great.
All hell breaks loose. The explosion thing happens. He jumps into the box and starts shooting everybody.
With his daughter in there, by the way.
Yeah, with his daughter in there.
Does not make any precautions for her.
Luckily, there was some other Good Samaritan who was, like, on top of her, holding her down, like, from all the gunfire that was going on. And the smoky room where he couldn't see shit.
Yeah, some stranger decided the situation was so dangerous that he used his body as a shield over this girl, while that girl's father shot up the place.
Yeah, not weekend dad, man.
I mean, yeah, it's good that he doesn't have full custody, clearly.
He takes him for a night, and this is what happens.
That is the last surprise hockey game these kids are ever going to.
And if I know anything about John McClane types, is that this shit is going to happen again and again and again.
Yep.
So keep the children far away from this man.
The budgets go down, though, so, like, the women's volleyball game. No!
So one of the last things I want to talk about is Powers Booth as he tries to put on a disguise and get away looking like a 70s porno star.
Yeah.
Is beautiful. It is gorgeous. That blonde mustache, that blonde hair, like it would.
He's
be
got a
super
Jesus
easy.
wig.
It would be super easy to go more into like looking like a pedophile in that area, but totally more John Holmes.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous disguise that he uses for nothing. Because when he's trying to escape the stadium, and the daughter who he had previously kidnapped recognizes him, that kid is nowhere near Van Damme at all, and she's yelling out to him, "That's him! That's him!" Like, we can't see that she's not right next to Van Damme. But
we
Powers
see her
Booth
walk
can.
away.
Yeah,
we see her walk away, and she's not even yelling. She's just like following right behind Powers Booth, going, "That's the man.
Yeah.
That's the man." And then she stops, and he's looking at her. It's like, "Well, yeah, and you also just walked 50 feet away from your father.
Yeah,
You're a horrible child. You deserve to be kidnapped."
Yeah, and he would have got away scot-free if he had not, for no reason.
If it wasn't for those lousy kids.
Yeah, he could have. Yeah, why did he pick up the kid and take it with her? Like, the dad wasn't even noticing what the kid was saying. Just run. You're a grown man. You can outrun this little fucking nerdy 6-year-old kid.
That's true. Yeah, but I mean, again, plot convenience.
Yeah.
But the final action shot of this, which is just like, of course, he has to chase Powers Booth, who has his daughter. Van Damme gets shot in the shoulder at some point, and then Powers Booth climbs up a ladder to a helicopter, which for some reason the police are doing nothing about. Even though, like,
all their helicopters got shot down by bazookas.
Yeah, exactly. There's tons of cops on the ground. They could have done something like, "Oh, hey, the bad guy's getting away in a helicopter. Let's do something about that." But anyway, he starts to escape. Van Damme gets on the ladder, shoots up at the helicopter, and kills both the pilots.
Yeah.
And then the helicopter just goes straight up in the air like it's the Titanic about to break in half. And then just like slowly careens down into the stadium and onto the ice. And it's kind of magnificent.
Yeah, it's perfectly perpendicular and stays that way. It stays at a 90-degree angle from the ice all the way down.
But again, almost to the point of parody.
Yeah.
As it's going down, there's still time where it's going slow enough for Powers Booth and Van Damme to lock eyes and know which one defeated the other.
Yep. No, that's a long, drawn-out, slow-motion shot. We see it slowly go by Van Damme, and then we see his daughter almost get killed in the helicopter blades, as mentioned earlier. It goes by really close. He does not seem plussed at all. Seems completely nonplussed by that. He's just glad he's sitting there locking eyes with the villain that's going down while his daughter has like a blade go 5 inches from her face.
Yeah, well, he's got to be the hero.
Yeah.
But anyway, and also there's also a shot as the helicopter is going down from above of Powers Booth going like, no!
Yep.
But then you still see the helicopter crash down into the ice, and then it cuts to inside the helicopter as Powers Booth gets engulfed in flames.
Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. I love every minute of it. And also, the helicopter scene gets the most notice, but I thought him pulling the gun up, jumping on the ladder, and like shooting the two pilots through the helicopter was extremely effective too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that whole scene works so great, which is why this movie ends with a sigh. Because, like, all of this happens, they go out, and it's very much like at the end of Die Hard, they're being carried out, he's on a stretcher or whatever. You'd think, like, there's going to be one bad guy that, you know, didn't get through, the mascot's going to come back, or something's going to happen to where, like, someone's going to try to hit him again, or there'll be some kind of resolution to the family problems, or to anything. Maybe the ex-wife will show up and, like, be like, oh, thank you for saving the kids. Anything. No, he gets wheeled out, put into an ambulance, cut to credits.
Yeah. Well, it's because he killed his Reginald Vell Johnson. Like, if in like a Die Hard ripoff, you get to meet the guy that you were on the other end of the radio. That in this case, you were sending scoreboard messages to, or outside like LED lights, which I thought was extremely clever. But he killed that guy, so there was no one to talk to. And
That's
wife,
true.
He didn't walk away with a
friend.
No, and his wife won't leave the doorway. Because
and
he's
she
a terrible
hated him
father, correctly.
Really gonna hate him now.
Yeah. No, and she has every right to. Again, I don't think that you can judge the wife after you see the parenting on display here. Like, there is a reason they are separated, and it's for the best.
Yeah, that little girl dying in the fire might have been the catalyst, but there were already problems at home.
There were definitely problems. I don't even think he's really from Canada, to be honest.
I think he might be in the witness protection program now that I think about it. He might have been an ex-mafia guy.
Yeah, he probably knew Powers Booth. They probably had worked together in some, like, weird military backstory. And actually, hold on, that makes me remember a part, though. For him not being like an everyday dad, they do talk about what a badass this guy is. Because he used to be in the army and stuff, but then they don't do anything with it.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe that's where his, like, demolitions expertise comes from. Like, maybe that's something, but it's not explained or anything. It's just like, oh, he's a firefighter, and, you know, this guy might be trouble because he has a record or whatever. But yeah, like, it doesn't explain the skills that he has. It doesn't explain him having any kind of fighting style or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, he's a firefighter and he was in the army. Uh-oh.
Yeah, they do kind of refer to him as a super cop at one point.
But he wasn't even a cop.
Well, like, but they do call him a super cop. Maybe they watched Super Cop recently and it was just on their mind.
It's a good movie.
Haven't seen it. Do you want to look at the Jackie Chan movies I've seen?
Those, have you seen Rumble in the Bronx?
I have not, no.
If you're gonna start with Rumble in the Bronx, because he has a lot of really good, like, martial arts movies and stuff, but that was his first real, like, big mainstream to the US movie, and it's great.
I need to watch it. Like I said, like 80s, 90s action is my blind spot. It's amazing. I think the only three, I think I could probably name 3 Jackie Chan movies, and those would be Rush Hour 1, Rush Hour 2, and then Curveball, Shanghai Noon.
Oh.
I never saw Rush Hour 3.
Completely unaware of Rush Hour 3.
I'm aware of it. I
Shanghai
didn't like the
Nights.
Yep, I didn't like any of those movies.
Yeah, no, none of those are good.
No.
But Jackie Chan makes a lot of incredible movies. See, and that's the thing, is that I'd like to think that I like all types of movies and that I'm refined in certain things. I like classical movies and foreign films and, different kinds of movies. But yeah, that my bread and butter is 80s and 90s action movies, and I know far more about those than I probably should.
Yeah, it's just, it's that weird...
I can name 6 Sasha Mitchell movies off the top of my head right now.
I'm not quite sure who that is.
Exactly.
Radham Mitchell is. No, I mean, I've seen... If you could find a science fictional horror movie, there's always stuff that I haven't seen. But, I think that's the weird thing about cinephilia is, I've seen thousands of movies. And there's, subsections that are just huge blind spots that I just have not covered. And, I'll be talking to someone who's seen a lot of movies, and I'm always like, how have you not seen Reanimator or something to someone that you just assume has a similar, cinematic diet that you have? And then I have to remember, oh, shit, I haven't seen Bloodsport. Everyone's seen Bloodsport. I haven't seen Bloodsport, Or,
because I didn't have
Rumble
TBS
in the Bronx, as a kid. Yeah, exactly. So it is always weird where... Because it is impossible to watch everything, and there's just sometimes certain genres that you end up kind of missing, or subgenres.
Yeah, well, and definitely, if you're not exposed to it, or if it's not really your thing, you won't really dive into it. But, yeah, I guess it is just all, what you're exposed to, what your friends, or what you watch when you're growing up and stuff like that. It definitely leads into it, but there's a lot of gold in the 80s and 90s action.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of it's silly, a lot of it's campy, but that's what's kind of amazing about it.
I really liked, I don't know if we're basically on final thoughts of this movie, but I really liked this movie. This maybe wasn't your typical Van Damme movie, but it was goofy, it was over the top, it was fun, and one of the reasons I really did like it, I think that if I had seen this in 1995 and had been watching all these movies, I think I may not have liked it as much. And that's not to disparage this movie, it's just that clearly, even though I haven't seen all of them, there was a ton of these movies. Type of action movie.
With hindsight, it gets a little bit better. It ages like a fine wine.
Yeah.
Because, in 95, this would have been the 6th one of these in 2 years that came out, and you probably would have been kind of burned out on them at this point.
Yeah, and now it's they don't make movies like this at all. They don't make it with this type of villains. They don't make that was in a weird movie era where it was just movies that created templates. There was Star Wars ripoffs and Jaws ripoffs and Die Hard ripoffs. And a movie could be good enough that they just started making mini genres based on a movie. Now all of our movies, for the most part, it's not entirely true. They still kind of do that. Hey, supernatural lovers. So you get Twilight, and you get all those different variations.
Yeah, young adult things. Let's adapt all those.
Yeah, but
superhero movies. Let's do all of those.
Yeah, it feels like you have broader genres, and that's where the templates are coming from. You don't really have a movie anymore that's so big that everyone just goes and makes that movie over and over and over again. And so it's
more they're just oh, that thing worked. Let's do something similar to that, in the same genre, based on a book, kind of like that.
Exactly, and I think that's why. So in 1995, this movie probably doesn't stand out as much. And maybe you don't like it. Maybe you like it. Who knows? But watching, and this is what I found a lot for horror movies. Anytime you go back to some of those, canon level or slightly above type action movies, or even these kind of second tier studio pictures, that they're really like a breath of fresh air from everything else you're watching nowadays. So fine wine is a good way to look at it, but I see it as it's the economy of movies change. This used to be kind of a worthless nugget in in an economy that was a movie economy that was completely inflated for action movie stars and Die Hard ripoffs, and now the inflation's gone down and they don't make this currency anymore. So when you find one, it's valuable.
I like that. That is a good way to put that. So before we get into our actual final thoughts and Van Damage rating, I didn't do this at the beginning, but I did just want to read the tagline for this movie because it's amazing.
Okay.
But it's just...
I don't know what it is. I'm excited.
So Jean-Claude Van Damme, sudden death. Action goes into overtime.
That's amazing.
So, final Van Damage rating. What I usually say is, as a Van Damme movie, we rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, or derailed to Bloodsport. Now, Bloodsport, that's kind of like the top tier. That's the one most everyone considers their favorite or one of the best. That's kind of like a 10. That's a perfect Van Damme movie. Has all the tropes.
That's my hard target.
Movie. Yeah, exactly. Hard target would kind of be like that. On the bottom, I put Jean-Claude Van Damme's other attempt at a Die Hard movie, 2001's Derailed, which was Die Hard on a train, and it is atrocious. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme, but the first piece I ever wrote about Die Hard ripoffs was about Derailed, and I almost wanted to quit the column immediately. I hated that movie so, and it's the only Van Damme movie I've seen at this point that I literally just loathe.
But you haven't seen Desert Heat.
I have not seen Desert Heat,
okay,
but I doubt it would go below that. Like that is a 1.
Okay.
So, just to give you stuff like, and you might have heard of it at least, but stuff like Cyborg or like Double Impact, we've been given like 5s, 4s, 5s. Stuff like Lionheart was getting like 8s. So it's kind of like good classic Van Damme movies or very entertaining, fun movies are probably like a 6 or above. Mediocre movies, 4 to 6, and shitty movies 1 to 3.
As a Van Damme movie, even though I've only seen a couple, again, I am familiar with like the concept of the tropes and how he works. Like, if you want to see a good Van Damme movie, this is probably a 4 out of 10. Like, it's just not. If you want to see a great second-rate Bruce Willis movie, this is like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, that's what I went with, a 7. This is a solid 7.
Yeah.
Because, it's not
That's my rating of the... Like, if you're going to convert this to letterbox ratings, like, it's 3.5, which would be a 7 out of 10. Like, I really did like this movie.
It's a lot of fun, and again, especially not seeing this type of movie as often anymore, like, it's fun. But yeah, at the time, like, 95, like, it's a year after Speed came out, 2 years after Cliffhanger, like... It's kind of the same thing with the Under Siege movies. 95 was also Under Siege 2. So, like, this was just... It was submerged in Die Hard ripoffs. It was saturated. The 90s were dripping Die Hard ripoffs.
Yeah, and you have kind of like a year after Pulp Fiction. So, like, this type of action is kind of starting to go away, and to more self-referential. And this kind of does that a little bit. But, like, I mean, sub Shane Black, I think, is appropriate. I actually think this movie would have been better if it would have been a little bit more sincere. And then the over-the-top stuff, like, the fact that it's trying to be clever and not succeeding, it's fun for Powers Booth, but all the other stuff kind of feels like if you would have went for more sincerity, I think it would be more charming. And as a result, better.
Absolutely, because it's not solid all the way through. There are a lot of kind of bad points in it, and there are some things that don't make a lot of sense, but the action is fun. Van Damme is great in this.
Great,
and that's the thing, like, in his early career, like, even in Bloodsport and stuff, the movie is really good, and the fights are awesome, but he's rough around the edges when it comes to acting. He's charming, he has kind of a natural, like, electricity to him that kind of draws you to him, but by this point, like, he'd been in hit movies, he's a leading man, he knows what he's doing, he knows how to carry a movie, and he does it really fucking well here.
Yeah, it's great. He's super charming. I don't even know what else you'd ask of this movie. Like, if you're gonna watch a Die Hard ripoff, I'm sure there's better ones I'm not thinking of, but this is excellent.
There's not that many. Like, most of them are, even the Die Hard sequels are just kind of like lesser Die Hards, like Die Hard and a blank.
I like Die Hard 2 quite a bit, but that's a different discussion.
I feel you. I also like Die Hard 2, but they're all kind of like lowering qualities of the original Die Hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't...
I like Live Free or Die Hard. So...
I do too. Yeah. Actually, I would rank them. This is going to be just some weird blasphemy at the end of this podcast, but I'd go 1, 4, 2. I'd put 3. I haven't seen.
And then we're not going to acknowledge 5.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either. I refused.
Yeah, everyone was way too down on it for me to like think that's going to be a worthwhile endeavor.
I would probably put 2 above 4, but 3 would still be. And I like 3 as well.
I do
3
too.
Would probably be the lowest on my list.
Which makes sense because 3 was originally a Lethal Weapon movie.
Yeah, that completely
makes
makes
sense. It shows, yeah. It's
And
still
honestly,
good.
like, it is just kind of overlong, though, and kind of bloated, and I don't know. Like, Jeremy Irons is a great villain in that, too, but I would rather watch Sudden Death than Die Hard 3.
I would probably choose Die Hard 3, but they definitely both have the overlong problem. Like, this movie should not be 110 minutes.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
I thought we were close to done, and I looked, and there was 50 minutes. I'm like, what? Like, he's going to confront the villain.
Yeah, honestly,
what are they doing?
Easily could have trimmed like 10 minutes off of this movie, and it would have been a lot tighter.
Yeah.
But again, solid 7. I'm with you on
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
again, just Van Damme film, I don't mean like it has to be like Bloodsport, it has to be a martial arts film. I just mean like overall as a Van Damme movie, a movie that he stars in and leads. Like, how much awesome Van Damme do you get?
Okay, in that case, I'll go 7 across the board. Like, based on your rating of like dancing, slow motion, and splits, there's none of that. So, but
Yeah.
just based on like an enjoyable action movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, definitely a solid 7.
So,
and I kind of want to watch it again though now, because I want to watch it with the eyes of this was supposed to be a joke.
I think you'll get a lot of good laughs out of it. And
I think
may
so.
I just recommend as a good double feature for you to kind of get your bearings with Van Damme, just watch a double feature of Bloodsport and Kickboxer.
Okay, ooh, should I? So I should hold, because I own Universal Soldier and I own Bloodsport. So can I do those two, or should I go with the Kickboxer Bloodsport?
Well, they're two completely different kind of things. Like, Universal Soldier is like a good kind of like sci-fi movie more so, but if you want like the standard of Van Damme, like what a Van Damme movie kind of tends to be, or at least was in the beginning, Bloodsport and Kickboxer make the perfect kind of double feature. They're also very similar in what they are as movies, but that really kind of gives you the rundown of Van Damme.
Okay, November, because I'm just about to go into here Halloween. It's going to be all horror movies. When I get out of that, I'm gonna do some Van Damme homework.
Yeah, he hasn't done too many horror movies, actually, because this was the second out of 3 films that he did with director Peter Hyams. The first one was Time Cop the year before. The last one they did was in 2013. It was Enemies Closer, which was like a weird little kind of thriller movie where Van Damme plays the bad guy, and he's like this weird Canadian Mountie that's like insane.
Yeah, and Peter Hyams made a couple of just like legitimately great movies. I would say Capricorn 1, 2010.
Outland.
I haven't seen Outland.
Ooh, Outland is great. And also, it's a kind of cheesy 90s movie. But
Sean Connery, right?
Yeah, Sean Connery's in that one. But the one I'm talking about now is like, it's a cheesy 90s movie, but I still kind of have a soft spot for it and like it. It's The Relic.
Oh yeah, I
97.
like The Relic.
Yeah, I like The Relic quite a bit.
See, that tells you, like, 97, The Relic, that was the type of movie I was, like, watching without my parents' permission.
Yeah.
Mimic, I wanted my science fiction horror.
That's the thing, I like The Relic, but it is just kind of the lesser Mimic.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, Aaron, as we wrap things up, what do you got to plug? What do you want people to check out? What's your Twitters and your Facebooks and all that garbage?
Oh, my God, I have so much to remember. So I'll leave it, because there's a lot of offshoots of this. But, yeah, myself and Peter Moran.
Who will be on the show eventually.
Yes. Co-host We Love to Watch, which is a movie podcast. We just wrapped up our 6-month anniversary episode. It hasn't released yet, but maybe by the time you're listening to this, it will be. And essentially, it's just there's not really too much of a theme besides we just talk about movies. We play some jokey games. We kind of do a thing where we essentially pick a theme for a month. We just got out of Bug Nuts month, which was stuff like Gokey or Hausu. And before that we did like redneck horror movies. That's really just to facilitate some sort of organization for our Google spreadsheet, which is like 300 movies deep.
Wow, you guys have way more than we do. Well, on Chris Solo, we just have kind of forgotten movies, and we probably have about like 3 full pages of movies that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, we have so much just brainstorming for months and months and months. And while we're doing it too, we'll think of some movie we want to cover. And November, actually, we're really kind of switching up kind of the style of stuff we're doing. We're doing some movies that really don't fit more of the 80s, 90s sci-fi horror stuff like that. But I mean, our kind of only rule for what movies we pick are just what do we think would be interesting to talk about. And that's basically it. We've had some episodes of movies that we've loved and some that we've disliked. We pick between stuff that we've seen before and stuff we haven't. It's a big mashup, and you can find us on the web, WLTWpodcast.com. We love to watch podcasts. WLTWpodcast.com.
And it's also on SoundCloud and Stitcher, which is where I've been listening to it.
Yep, iTunes. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook page. You can look at facebook.com. We love to watch. YouTube, where Dustin Koski has been very nice, and he kind of manages that and has worked with us to pick clips to kind of edit down into small versions. So if you're not sure you want to commit to a full episode, because they do tend to run on the long side, feel free to check out our YouTube page and listen to some clips and see if it's up your alley.
Also, Zach Gruten, who is going to do the podcast here eventually, does amazing artwork for you
Oh,
guys.
yeah. That was just finding a complete, like, we had him on the show, and he's like, hey, I did some drawings for some of your first episodes if you want to use them. And then he's kind of become kind of an administrator of some of our stuff. It's kind of been fun to kind of accidentally add people on the show. And Marcus is actually, we haven't announced the month's theme yet, but Marcus is going to be on our show in December talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night, which we're extremely excited for.
I am extremely excited about. Thank you very much for joining me today, Aaron. Definitely check out We Love to Watch podcast all over the place. Where can they follow you on the Twitters?
Yeah, they can. We don't really do much at Twitter yet. So if you're going to follow us, we're really trying to make our Facebook page the main place for engagement. We're going to start doing eventually next year some polls of like what theme months we should do and kind of start outsourcing more ideas. And we also kind of have some plans for next year to not change up the format, but maybe change a few little structure things. So we definitely want as much audience engagement. So if you're going to follow us somewhere, you can follow us on Twitter. We just haven't quite figured out the best way to use that as an engagement piece, but I think we're starting to figure out Facebook a little more.
Awesome. Well, good luck with technology.
Yeah.
And we will see you here next time on Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Hiya!
I actually said that wrong. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah!
There we go. And then the Chris Pratt sudden death song is going to play.
Oh, perfect.
This is the story of sudden death, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. An awesome movie about karate and hockey, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Picture this, it's Game 7. Stanley Cup Finals, the Pittsburgh Penguins versus Chicago Blackhawks. Jean-Claude Van Damme's playing a lowly fire marshal who's there enjoying the game with his family. The vice president's there, also a group of terrorists. And they've raped the Pittsburgh Civic Arena with bombs? Oh no! This is a story of sudden death, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. An awesome movie about karate and fighting. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme, the first terrorist he meets is a chick. She's dressed up in a Penguins uniform. He meets her in the kitchen. Big fight sequence. He kicks her into the dishwasher where she drowns and dies and is choked. Better tell security. Turns out the security guard also a terrorist. So Jean-Claude Van Damme stabs him in the neck. This is a story of sudden death, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. A pretty awesome movie about terrorists and hockey. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Oh no, so now Jean-Claude Van Damme's running around disabling bombs and the hockey game is still going on. So he goes and talks to the head of the Secret Service. Turns out he's one of the terrorists. So Jean-Claude Van Damme kills him. Then he mistakenly puts on a Penguins uniform and they think that he's the goalie. They push him out into the game where he has to play. 2 seconds left, 1 second left. He blocks the shot, sending the game into sudden death. This is a story of sudden death, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. An awesome movie about terrorism and hockey. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Then a terrorist falls to the scoreboard, landing on the ice, freaking everybody out. Jean-Claude Van Damme climbs up to the VIP suite, where the vice president is still there with his kids. He has a big fight sequence. He kills some of the terrorists. But the main terrorist takes his daughter up onto the roof and tries to get her into a helicopter. And that's when Jean-Claude Van Damme kills the pilot, takes his daughter, saves her, kills the terrorist, and the helicopter goes crashing down in through the stadium and lands on the ice. This was a story of sudden death with Jean-Claude Van Damme. A topical story about patriotism, terrorism, and hockey with Jean